Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Grace Estrada for Psych 92 Developmental Psychology. We are talking about Chapter 4, Early Childhood Psychosocial or Socio-Emotional Development. In Erikson's theory of socio-emotional development, we are now in stage 3. So stage 1 is infancy through childhood. Remember that the primary task is learning that the world is a safe place, that their needs will be met essentially by their caregivers. Once they feel safe in the world, now they want to explore it. So that's stage 2, autonomy versus shame. So you'll see a lot of young toddlers wanting to go out on their own. Well, they wouldn't go out on their own unless they felt the world was a safe place. And the idea with autonomy versus shame is you want to encourage children, keep them in a safe environment where they can explore. You don't want them to be embarrassed about any mistakes they might make. In stage 3 now, we're in early childhood, it's initiative versus guilt. So initiative means they're seeking their own interests in a socially acceptable, productive way. You want them to feel like they are contributing members of your family, of society. The guilt part is when they feel like they're not contributing, like they're not useful. It's really interesting that there's sort of an inherent desire to be a useful member of society. So when children at this age, they might want to help with chores, encourage them, right? If they make mistakes, that's okay. Just keep giving them these opportunities to feel like they're helping out with the family. That's the idea here with initiative versus guilt. So initiative, we're talking about the motivation to do things, right? And then the guilt is sort of how they feel badly, especially if they're criticized when they're trying to do things, or if you make mention that they're not doing enough. So a lot of it has to do with support. In early childhood, we say the child's world is expanding because a lot of times, especially in this society in North America, we start exposing them to more things. We take them to daycare. Maybe they go into these classes, right? At this stage, they're really learning a lot by observation. They're learning from the social interaction, which is where Vygotsky's sociocultural theory comes in. They also start to develop a sense of self. Early childhood is wonderful because they really feel like the sky is the limit. They feel like they can do anything, and it's just a wonderful innocent stage. This is also where they start to learn more about themselves. So in terms of identity development, what we're talking about at this stage, because they're so young, is identification. So with identification, they're looking at the role models. They're looking at the people in their lives who they look up to, and they now want to act like them. So you'll see little boys maybe wanting to dress up like their dad, or, different things, but they're looking at people in their lives who mean a lot to them, and they now want to imitate them. So the social environment is very, very powerful at this stage, and you really see it in the way the children behave. Um, and there are two types of identity, and we'll talk about this also in adolescence. When we talk about personal identity, these are the I statements. At this age in early childhood, their personal identity is synonymous with what they can do. So they focus on capabilities. I know my ABCs. I can dress myself. I can feed myself. Those kind of ideas. So they take a lot of pride in what they can do. Goes with the whole initiative component. Social identities are those that are tied to certain groups. So at this time, we'll talk about gender identity development, the idea of what does it mean in society to be male or female, that kind of idea. The other type of identity development that starts at this age is racial or ethnic identity. They start to pay attention, especially as they go out into the world and see others who look different from them, right? Now they get a sense of what it means to be Asian. And a lot of this, of course, is culturally defined or like Latina, any of those things. So at this stage, there is the personal identity where they're talking about themselves. And again, it's tied to what they're able to do. And then they start to understand the nuances of social identity as well. So the personality formation occurs. And then there's the socialization aspect, which is a social aspect, which is where the social identity comes in. So we don't lock up kids in our homes, right? We should not be doing that. They should be exposed to others, and this gives them a greater sense also of community, which is really important. So with personality formation, what are we talking about? We're talking about a very stable sense of how they feel and think and behave. And this part, the personality, the personal identity is stable, right? If we say somebody is really calm, usually they'll be calm everywhere they go, school, home, church, anything like that. It's the social part that could change based on the groups that they're with. So at this stage, it is important to socialize children and choose who they're interacting with, because they learn from others what are the standards and values that are acceptable in society. What kind of knowledge should you have when you're interacting with others? How should you be behaving? All of this is really important for children to get along in the world. So it is I'm not saying go spank your kids or anything, but discipline is important in the sense that they should be aware of what is acceptable and not acceptable behavior when they are with others. And if you're not consistent with that, you could end up with a child who has a lot of problems getting along with others in school. So you're not doing your children any favors by letting them run wild, in other words, right? Because they're always going to be interacting with others. So the more you can gently guide them to behave in a way that others find it easy to accept, you're doing them a favor overall. So identity development begins early, right? It is influenced by outside factors. So the more you expose children to other people, family members, things like that, the more their identity development is actually going to progress. So there are two main types, remember, of identity, of the social identity that we talk about. There's the gender identity and ethnic identity. What we know from research is gender identity tends to develop first. Usually about 2.5 years old, they'll start to categorize themselves as a girl or a boy. This is normative, generally. Depends again on how families are. Some more and more families are trying to avoid the labeling of girl or boy, but it's really hard to change that. At 2.5 years old, they're generally unaware of biological differences, unless they're seeing somebody, without any clothes on a regular basis. In preschool, okay, so we're going to differentiate between gender and sex. Sex meaning biological, gender meaning the psychological idea. So in preschool, they believe they can change their sex by changing their hairstyle or clothing. So if a girl is wearing boys' clothes, they might say, "Oh, you're a boy now," that kind of idea. And they're thinking biology, not gender, right? 6 to 7 years old, they understand the constancy of being biologically female or biologically male. And in adolescence, now, usually adolescents, especially nowadays, they start to explore the spectrum of gender. In terms of ethnic identity, this again depends on if the child is in a family where everyone is the same race or ethnicity or not. If you have a mixed heritage child, ethnic awareness actually starts earlier. But 3 to 4 years old, start to notice differences about, when they go out, like, oh, how come these people look different from me? 6 to 8 years old is we call ethnic identification. So now kids understand that they're not going to suddenly change their ethnic or racial background. And they start to identify as being Asian, as being Latina, as being Black, like all of these things. Usually that discussion starts about 6 to 8 years old. 8 to 10 years old, they start to develop what we call ethnic attitudes, feelings about ethnic groups, not just their own, but also those outside. A lot of this is socialization, and it doesn't have to be verbal. So as primary caregivers, you want to make sure that your expressions, your facial expressions, all of those things are neutral or positive about others, because little kids pick up on it, right? And then by the time somebody's in adolescence to adulthood, there could be a negotiation. So, a lot of times mixed heritage people will decide, No, I'm not, I'm gonna say I'm American instead of saying, they're Latina or Asian or both or anything like that. So it's usually, and it changes. A lot of it has to do with what you're exposed to, if you've had positive experiences or negative experiences, and the discussions that's going on in the family in terms of ethnic identity. Any questions about gender identity or ethnic identity development? Okay, so sex role identity, becoming male or female, a lot of times it's in culture. What we know, we have certain theories about how people develop their sex role identity. So what we focus here are social learning theory, gender schema theory, and actually we're not doing cognitive development, we're doing developmental intergroup theory. So sorry, I'll have to change that one. With social learning theory, that's really based on Bandura. The terms you should understand, or the parts you should understand, is imitation, modeling, imitation, and differential reinforcement. So modeling is what the children see in the primary caregivers. So in the picture in the bottom, you see the mom is carrying the baby. She's modeling. Imitating is the little girl pretending that her doll is a baby as well. So kids will imitate what they see from the people in their environment. Then you have the component of differential reinforcement. This is the key. Remember in behaviorism, we talked about operant conditioning, rewards and punishment. Differential reinforcement means the reaction of the caregiver to how the child is imitating them. So if the mom, you could see she's smiling, she looks at the little girl and she says, "Oh, you're so cute. You're pretending your doll is like your baby brother," or something like that. That phrase, that "you're so cute" in the smile, that is reinforcing the child to continue that imitation. So she's being rewarded by mom's smile and positive responses to what she's doing. Now, let's say it's a little boy who has a doll and pretending. If mom says, "Oh, it's so cute that you're pretending that, you have a little baby as well," then the little boy is going to get the message that it's okay for boys to be caregivers. On the other hand, if mom says, "What are you doing? Boys don't play with dolls," you see, that's a punishment in their minds. That's negative. So it's going to reduce the likelihood that that the little boy will copy the mom and will feel like caregiving is okay for boys. So differential reinforcement is a huge key in social learning theory. Again, the three components are modeling by the primary caregiver or others. Imitating is what the child does. And then differential reinforcement will determine whether or not the child will continue that behavior. If they receive positive responses, then they're going to continue the behavior. If they receive negative responses, which could even be a frown, they will learn that it's not appropriate for them and they will discontinue the behavior. Any questions about social learning theory? Okay, gender schema theory. When you hear the word schema, you should be thinking mental representation. So here, the idea is that children form a schema of what is relevant to them as male or female in the society. So here's an example. They're in school or something and they see these toys on the table. There's a toy truck, there's a doll, orange, and an artichoke. So they have a schema of what is appropriate to them. So they look at it and they're like, who's this for? Well, they might be thinking, "Oh, there are only boys or girls." We know that that's not necessarily true, but for children, that's really what they choose from, whether they're boys or girls. And if they identify as a girl, they might say, "I'm a girl. Is this relevant to me?" Right? This relevance is based on information they have received previously. Remember, schema is their representation. So if they feel like a toy truck is relevant to them, then they're going to play with it. They're going to assign that category, remember, and they're like, "Okay, I'm going to play with trucks." On the other hand, if the message they've received previously is that trucks are not for them, they're going to avoid it and not play with it at all. So gender schema theory, they form this mental representation of what is appropriate or inappropriate for them based on their understanding from others of whether they identify as boy or a girl. So that is gender schema theory. So social learning theory has to do with the modeling and imitation reinforcement. Gender schema theory is more of a model that they have created. And of course, that model that they created in their mind of what's appropriate and inappropriate does draw on information from others as well. Questions about gender schema theory? Okay, and then there's developmental intergroup theory. So this one's actually a newer theory. It's 2007. And so developmental intergroup theory really focuses on the cultural influence of gender. So when we talk about cultural influence, that also includes, it could be like media exposure, right? So here, we're really talking about the social emphasis, not just the caregivers, but everything that we see in society, including media exposure. So with developmental intergroup theory, now we're thinking about the stereotypes that people create in their minds of what is stereotypically female and stereotypically male. Very, very much culturally defined. So some cultures are much more strict about what is acceptable for a female to be wearing or doing, and others, are more liberal or open-minded. But the idea here is developmental intergroup theory, the formation of what people believe is appropriate for being a boy or a girl is coming from social interactions. It's coming from the culture. It's coming from people, not necessarily only in their family, but also in greater society. That all those ideas, all those exposure helps them build stereotypes in their mind of what is appropriate for being, if they identify male or identify female. Questions about developmental intergroup theory? Okay, so those three theories, you should know the differences in how children acquire their understanding of gender. Here are some terms that you really need to understand and differentiate. So gender, remember, that's the social construct, socially constructed understanding of what it means to be male and female, right? Then we have gender roles. That's the orange one. Gender roles are expectations that we have of what it means to be like male or female, and that is influenced by our social and cultural messages. So the gender roles are going to depend on the society that you live in. Gender identity is a person's sense of what it means to be male or female. It is influenced by society, but that's just like personal understanding of what it is. Usually by about 3 years old, somebody gets that. And then you have gender typing. Oh, here we go. And that is when you start to get that understanding of the gender role. So you start off with gender, right? Gender is that psychological aspect of being male or female. You are exposed to cultural expectations of what it means to be male or female. That's the gender roles. Gender typing is you start to acquire. So being aware of something is different from starting or trying to meet those expectations. So gender typing is when you're starting to meet those expectations, and then you form your gender identity. So those are the kind of the phases that go with gender identity. Questions about these? You should know the differences in these terms: gender, gender roles, gender typing, and gender identity. Okay. When we talk about the sex role identity, there is a biological component as well. So what we know, remember we talked about how the Y chromosome is much smaller than the X chromosome. We do see that males tend to be more vulnerable to certain things. And a lot of it has to do with that Y chromosome being smaller. We know that there are higher rates of certain developmental disabilities in male infants. That includes autism, that includes ADD, that includes certain learning disabilities. So we do think that this could be triggered by, just that XY chromosome difference. We also know that there are certain differences in brain structure of male and females. So part of that difference in brain structure could oftentimes actually impact how we process emotional information. So there's more and more research showing this. They don't like to talk about these biological differences because we don't want to take it to the extreme where, oh, you're a boy, you can't express, your feelings, anything like that. There are differences. We understand there are biological differences. They're not so significant that it would impair somebody from ever actually being emotionally available or being able to express it. The idea with understanding the biological differences or influences is the tendency to initiate certain actions or the tendency to express certain things. It doesn't mean they're incapable. It's just a matter of whether or not people are more likely to express things than others. So something to keep in mind. In terms of social influence, parents are the biggest influence of all because children are with them on a daily basis. So you walk into a store, it's painfully obvious what's male, what's female, right? Girls all pink, boys all blue. If parents buy into this, so the whole idea of like the gender reveal, right? Again, that's something that is socially constructed, and we're buying into it as a society. Ideally, we actually want to put less emphasis because no color is male or female. Whether or not we associate that with being male or female is something that is socially constructed. And so children can learn that it's okay for boys to wear pink. There are a lot more choices for girls than there are boys because plenty of girls wear blue, but there is almost a stigma, sometimes some people will look down on a boy if he wears pink or purple. So again, a lot of it is old fashioned. We're trying to change things. A lot of hope for Gen Alpha, right? That these things will be less common. But right now in the society we live in, it's still extremely common. You walk into any store of children's clothing, it's so easy to tell where the girls section is and where the boys section are, right? How else do parents influence children's understanding is by household responsibility. So a lot of times boys will be given things like go mow the lawn, go take out the trash, while daughters are told, go wash the dishes, help in the kitchen. So even the way that children are assigned responsibilities sends them a message. So as caregivers, as parents, they should be responsible for both. Both sons and daughters should help outside with things outside, and sons and daughters should help with things inside as well. And that way we kind of reduce that differentiation. How else are parents influencing it? Well, if parents have biases, it's going to show through things like what kind of books are they sharing with their children? How scared and angry does the baby girl feel? Fairy tales, classic fairy tales, those actually share stereotypes, right? Oh my goodness, like Sleeping Beauty. What does she do the entire time? She's sleeping. She's completely helpless, right? So you want to reduce sending that message to the girls that they are supposed to be damsels in distress and that the boys are supposed to rescue them. So a lot of this is social influences in the media, right? Portrayals are highly stereotypical. Here we go. Sophia the First, a princess in a dress, really sweet and kind. And then you have Jake the pirate, who's adventurous. All of these things are sending messages to young children. Children are not born with this understanding. They learn it through these different messages, books they read, shows they watch, reactions of caregivers. All of these send messages to them about what is appropriate for males and females. And so we need to be very cognizant of that. Other influences also, teachers, right? So a lot of teachers have gendered beliefs about the academic ability. Over and over again, we see a lot of times teachers call on boys more than girls. So there's that argument for the same-sex schools, all girls school, all boys school. Research indicates that actually it's helpful for girls in the sense that they don't need to compete with boys. On the other hand, boys actually do better in a co-ed environment, and the theory is that girls are a civilizing influence on boys, whereas for girls, when in an all-girl environment, they are less likely to be hindered by the understanding that girls are supposed to be quiet and shy. So in an all-girl environment, usually the girls are more ready to take chances and risk when there are no boys in the room. What else do we have? We have cross-cultural differences. So in Tahiti, for example, there are no gendered pronouns, he versus she. And there is a theory that cultures where they have gendered pronouns tend to have greater differences between males and females. So it's something that, for instance, there used to be a time when school teachers would walk into a room and say, "Good morning, boys and girls." And that's really discouraged now because, again, you're emphasizing the gender differences. So instead, teachers are taught to say, "Good morning, class." Because why is it okay for them to say, "Good morning, boys and girls"? You would never hear a teacher say, "Good morning, Latinos and Asians." Like you would not hear that, right? So same idea is we actually want to reduce the emphasis of gender differences as much as possible, because we are seeing that sometimes it becomes problematic. So impact of gender dysphoria is the term used for when people feel distressed when there is a mismatch between their gender identity and biological sex. So if somebody is biologically male, but they feel more akin to, being a girl, if there is distress, then we call that gender dysphoria. So it's the American Psychological Association says the mismatch is not the disorder, it is the distress that they feel because of the mismatch that is considered the disorder. As we, our society is navigating all of this, we are still in the process of trying to be, I think, more cognizant of what is quote unquote acceptable behaviors or qualities for being male or female. Problems that we experience are things like sexual harassment, rape. The income gap between males and females is something that has not gone away. So we can't say everybody is the same when there are these differences that we need to address in society. So we are still in the process of doing that. So that's the whole discussion about the gender identity development. Now let's talk about ethnic identity development. Before I move on, are there any questions about ethnic identity development? Oh, sorry, are there any questions about gender identity development? Okay, so with ethnic identity, we're talking about becoming a certain race or ethnicity, right? Ethnic identity, we're talking about the belonging you feel to an ethnic group. And it actually, when more and more we're having mixed heritage people, so they have more than one ethnic identity to choose from. So this includes feelings and attitudes, and where it becomes relevant is when you notice that you are not part of the majority in a group. So we'll talk about that understanding and sensation. But in terms of ethnic identity, oftentimes we refer to majority as white, Caucasian, and non-majority as other groups. So with ethnic identity, a lot of it is cultural socialization. What are parents teaching their kids? What are families conveying to the children? Is it ethnic heritage? Is it pride? Right? This is what's nice about, Black History Month or Asian American Month, all of these things that we are setting aside these certain months to really highlight the positive attributes of these different ethnic and racial groups. If the families emphasize the heritage and pride, there are actually better outcomes for kids. Now, unfortunately, there are going to be instances of discrimination and prejudice. But if that's all that is emphasized to the children, then they're going to feel bad and really mistrust the majority. So what we want is we want to emphasize the ethnic heritage and pride component, but also kind of warn them, especially like dialogue is so important when it comes to things that, they experience. If they experience discrimination or prejudice, to help them understand the goal is that we want equality for all. We're not there yet. We know we aren't there yet. But let's try to emphasize the positive aspects, because in terms of self-esteem and feeling, emphasizing the positive aspects to children have better outcomes than always focusing on the negatives, on discrimination, prejudice. So something to keep in mind, especially for early childhood. And so so as I mentioned, if you teach ethnic heritage and pride, self-esteem tends to go up. If you focus on discrimination, prejudice, a lot of times behavioral issues start to come up. Any questions about this one? Okay, so we're going to talk about social identity theory, which is not in the book, but it's something that needs to be discussed, especially when we talk about things like social identity. So in social identity theory, this is created by Tashful and Turner, they posited that when a person is, that the person's sense of self, so their personal part, really comes from how they feel about groups they belong to. And we belong to many different groups. But if you have an in-group, those are the groups that you identify as us. Whenever you say we or us, you're talking about your in-group. If you say they or them, then you're talking about your out-group. So an in-group, that involves anybody who you feel a belonging to. Out-group is a group that you don't feel like you belong to. Why is this important? Because there's something known as out-group bias and in-group favoritism. Over and over again, research has showed that people tend to be nicer, be friendlier, be kinder, be more giving to those who they feel are part of their in-group, and they tend to not treat those who are part of their out-group as well. That's really important because our in-group could be really, really large. When we walk into a room, there are three things that happen and we have absolutely no control over it. So number one is categorization. There are three components that we notice about people within the first 10 seconds that we meet them, and that is their approximate age, their race or ethnicity, and gender. This is true even for young babies, that they recognize that there are differences. So categorization, we're aware that differences exist. I like to think about it as a way that we're looking for commonality, right? So maybe you look at somebody like, oh, they look like they're about my age. I can talk to them about music or something like that. Or oh, I think this person looks like we're probably the same race or ethnicity. Maybe there's some kind of food that we like together. Or it could be gender, where it's like, maybe some things that you can connect to on that basis. But the very first thing you do whenever you walk into a room is you're actually subconsciously categorizing people. A lot of times it could be based on physical attributes because you don't know them. You're just looking, purely appearance. It could be cultural characteristics that are the clue as well. So first you categorize. Second one is identification. Who in the room could be part of the social groups that you belong to? So now you're kind of gauging, again, subconsciously, the group membership that you have. And finally, comparison. What is the status of the group in the room, right? So what social identity theory says is that we are most aware of the social identity in which we are a minority in the room. And the idea is that it is a way of survival, because if you're a minority in the room, you need to be alert, right? You're in a position of weakness when you are a minority. So for instance, you walk into a room and let's say everybody is an Evergreen Valley College student, but you're a San Jose City College student. You're going to be aware of that. If everybody's wearing an Evergreen Valley College shirt and you're wearing San Jose City College, you're the only one in the room. You're going to be very aware of that social group more than anything else. Now, let's say everybody's wearing the same colored shirt. You walk in, now you might be paying attention to, okay, are there people who are the same gender identity as me? If you are female and everybody else in the room is male, you're going to be hyper aware of that. If you are the only Asian in the room and everybody else, you have mixed groups, you're going to be aware of that. So every time you walk in, you are automatically gauging the room. You're categorizing based on these three identities: age, race, race or ethnicity, and gender. Automatically happening. Whichever one you are a minority in is going to come to the forefront in your head. It's really an interesting. So categorization, identification, you're kind of gauging, and then comparison. Which one, are you a minority in? What is important to recognize is that we have many groups. We have more groups than just age, race, or ethnicity, or gender. We have religion, we have ability status, we have culture, we have orientation, sexual orientation, we have education, we have socioeconomic status, we have political affiliation. There are many, many different groups. So if you can focus now, shift, and you can do this, explicitly to, okay, look, everybody's wearing a green shirt, everybody's an Evergreen Valley college student, everyone should be part of your in-group. Instead of focusing on the differences, right? You focus on differences, you should be focusing on the similarities. When you focus on what is similar, and this is a practice that you have to do, you will feel a greater sense of belonging to any situation. Instead of focusing on the differences, which are automatic, right? You will feel less alone in any situation when you focus on the similarities. And that's the key in terms of being able to do better. Because if you feel like you're alone, it's going to be much more difficult for you to learn. It's because you're hyper aware. You're not going to be focusing on things like learning. Because remember, Maslow's hierarchy, you want to feel safe. If you feel like you have a sense of belonging, that you're in a safe place, now you can move on to those higher potentials of self-esteem and learning. So as much as you can, when you walk into a room, yes, you're going to be aware of where you are a minority, but now focus on what you have in common with others in that room. And that's going to help a lot. And this is what we need to teach our children, to teach young children, is not to focus on differences, but look for similarities. Any question about social identity theory? So some things to know. Remember, I mentioned that early childhood is a wonderful, innocent stage, right? Here, self-concept in early childhood is very high and it's categorical, right? They focus on things like what they can do. They focus on external qualities. They might focus on, oh, I have, a lot of stuffed animals. I have these collections. So it's not really about their characteristics or personality, but at this stage, that is very typical. In terms of self-esteem, their self-esteem is at an all-time high because they don't compare themselves with others at this stage. Early childhood is really wonderful because they're just thinking about what they can do. When you come to middle and late childhood, suddenly social comparison comes in and the self-esteem plummets. But for early childhood, self-esteem is very, very high. And now what we really want to focus on in early childhood is self-control, because that is incredibly important for future success. So response in the initiation. So the classic study on self-control is the marshmallow test. If you're not familiar with it, I have a link to that as well. And the idea there is that you have a researcher, they bring these young children to the room and there's a marshmallow on a plate. And they tell the child, okay, if you wait until I come back, you can have more marshmallows, like 3 more marshmallows. So then they leave the child alone in the room with the marshmallow for a really long time. And the test is to see how long does it take for the child to eat the marshmallow, or if they don't eat it at all. And this was a longitudinal studies, and the children who were able to delay, it's called delayed gratification, who were able to resist eating the marshmallow had much better outcomes in life than those who ate it right away. And you'll see some of the kids just like pop it into their mouth as soon as the researcher leaves. So the idea here is self-control. So response initiation is when you can delay an action until you have all of the information. So you're not doing anything until you learn more about the situation, right? Stop yourself from doing anything. Response inhibition happens if you're already doing an action and then you are able to stop it. So let's say you're driving and somebody cuts you off. Response initiation is when you stop yourself from chasing the person who just cut you off. Like you're really mad, but you're going to stop yourself. Response inhibition is you start speeding and then you stop yourself. You're like, wait, this is not worth it. I am not going to chase this person. Okay, so response initiation is you don't even start chasing somebody. Response inhibition is you stop yourself. You started chasing them and you stop. And then delayed gratification is when you hold off for a larger reward, right? So you forego something, like your initial thing might be, oh, I'm going to go after this person. But delayed gratification might be, you know what? This person is such a bad driver. I bet they're going to get a ticket later. And even just that thought is enough for you. Like, okay, that's my reward for being patient. I'm going to get, make it to my destination safely. I'm not going to worry about that. The best example of delayed gratification is our educational system, right? You're taking all of these classes with the idea that at the end there is a big reward, which is your graduation, right? So delayed gratification is you're doing a number of little things with a big reward at the end, that you're able to forego things. So it's like, okay, I am not going to watch all these shows that I want to watch. I'm going to wait until the spring semester is over, and then I'm going to do a binge. That's your big reward, right? So response initiation is, okay, I'm not even going to start this because I know it's going to distract me from what I'm doing. Response inhibition, maybe you watch one episode and you're like, okay, that's it. I'm not going to do any more. And then delayed gratification is, oh, I'm going to wait till the very end of the semester. All the episodes will be out and I can just do a binge watch and it won't affect my grades. So those are the different types of self-control. So make sure you know the differences: response initiation, response inhibition, and delayed gratification. Any questions? Okay, that's the link to the video for the marshmallow test. So it's just a funny little cartoon. What do we want? The benefits of delayed gratification. When do we want it? Now, right? Why is this important? Because self-regulation has many positive correlations with wonderful outcomes later in life. If you can regulate yourself, if you can stop yourself from engaging in activities that are distracting or harmful, you can set realistic goals, right? Realistic and achievable goals. It helps you with persistence in implementing the plans to achieve those goals. Very important for success, right? So you can actually employ these skills of self-regulation in many different aspects of life, not just school, could be work, could be family. The more somebody is able to regulate themselves and their emotions, they have better outcomes overall. Interpersonal skills, academic and athletic and financial. Any questions? Okay, so let's just talk about kind of relationships, because this is socio-emotional component. So in terms of life teachers, really first teachers are parents, our primary caregivers. Siblings are the longest relationships we have in our entire lives, because, parents, we know them as adults, and then as they get older, they'll pass away by the time we're middle adulthood, right? Siblings, you know them probably from your conscious, from the first time you're conscious that you're even alive. And they because they are about your age, they're going to be with you throughout your existence. And so sibling relationships are really important. Other ways we learn about life are peers. Of course, friends are important, but media, especially in this day and age, is also an important component in terms of learning more about the world we live in. In terms of parental influence, what do we learn from them? Gender socialization, ethnic racial socialization, parenting styles becomes very important in terms of our relationship not only with our parents, but generally how we interpret things. So we often group parental styles by Baumrins for different types: authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, or indulgent, uninvolved. And we look at this with two dimensions. How much control does the parent want? And how responsive are the parents to their children? If somebody has high control, wants high control, but isn't very responsive, we call them authoritarian. These are the very strict parents, the drill sergeant type parents, the my way or the highway type of parents, right? So they want to control what the child's doing, not very understanding when the child does not listen, and they're not very responsive. On the other hand, an authoritative parent is one who also wants high control, but is very responsive to their children. So they communicate, they negotiate things, they explain things to their kids. This is really, in many ways, the ideal parent, right? So high control, high responsiveness. Now, if a parent has low control, but is very responsive, so they don't have, that's what we call permissive indulgent. This is the parent who wants to be the best friend of the child. So they don't have much expectations about their children. They give them pretty much everything they want, not much discipline. And this is where you end up with a lot of kids who are really spoiled, right? A permissive indulgent parent. And then you have the uninvolved or permissive neglectful parent who isn't interested in really controlling what their child is doing and isn't responsive either. So these are usually the kids have the worst outcomes with the uninvolved or permissive neglected parents. Parents aren't really paying attention to their children at all. So make sure you know the differences. Here's another way of sort of illustrating it. You can see the dimensions on the top part is expectations or control, and on the left side is warmth or responsiveness. So low responsiveness, low expectations or control, we call that uninvolved. Low responsiveness, high control, authoritarian. So you might think authoritarian rhymes with barbarian, so kind of mean, right? High control, low expectations, we call that permissive or permissive indulgent. And then high responsiveness, high control would be authoritative. You could think of give, kind of rhymes with give. They're more giving, communicative, but also want control over their children. Any questions about the parenting styles? Understand that there are cultural differences, right, of what is considered, I guess, acceptable. So some groups might be more authoritarian, but their kids still have good outcomes. What we also know is social class plays a role into the type of parenting that happens. I mean, if a parent is working a lot and hardly home, then it's not really their fault that they can't be there a lot for their children, but maybe they come home and they're trying to be really responsive, right? So what we know is that working class, blue collar or lower, there's a lot more emphasis on compliance. Maybe they don't have time or the energy to explain things. And so you end up seeing a lot more authoritarian type parenting. What's important is that communication is really key for children, that they understand why they have to do things, especially as they get older. But a lot of times it's in early childhood, we start to see the oftentimes the results of the parenting style that the children experience at home. Another big topic is spanking. So what we know is that research indicates a lot of negative outcomes for spanking. And again, it depends on the frequency of it. If that is the number one go-to punishment for a parent, then it can be really problematic. Kids learn aggressive behavior. They learn might makes right because parents are bigger. They could almost be seen as bullies, right? And they are physically taking it out on smaller individuals. And so the message children get is that it's okay to pick on people who are smaller than you. We also see that children whose parents engage in a lot of spanking, they're more likely to break rules. They actually have lower vocabulary scores, and we find overall that it does not improve behavior. What happens is kids just learn to hide the things that they're doing. So it's not that they learn that they should be good, they just learn to hide it to avoid the spanking. So there are many other forms of punishment that don't include corporal punishment that is still really effective in terms of controlling children's behaviors. Any questions or comments about spanking? Okay, sibling relationships, as I mentioned, that's kind of really lifelong. What we know, what do kids gain from it is they get a lot of social skills from their sibling relationships. They learn about empathy. They learn about sharing, about cooperation. There's a lot of negotiation and conflict resolution that goes on in sibling relationships. What do we see? What affects the quality? A lot of times it's the parent-child relationship. If parents engage in explicit favoritism, that negatively impacts sibling relationships. It does not help anybody. So parents do not show favoritism. It becomes problematic. So the quality of the parent-child relationship will affect the sibling relationship. So again, if parents try to be equal and show love and care equally, that's going to improve the relationship of the siblings. We also see that individual characteristics also are going to influence the relationship. So if one child is, for example, more introverted, then that can have an effect on the sibling relationship. But generally, they're really important because they are lifelong. And the sibling relationships tend to change as based on the age of the children as well. Any questions about sibling relationships? Okay, play is so important for children in early childhood. Freud believed that play was important to release pent-up emotions. A lot of times, child psychologists will use play to see how children demonstrate any problems that they may have been experiencing. So play is a way of really helping children manage emotional distress, especially if they feel like they're in a safe environment. Vygotsky and Piaget believed that play was critical in developing intellectual abilities, but it's also important to give children just time for free play. They should not be overscheduled, right? Give them time to just, even if they just want to lie down and relax and hug a stuffed animal or anything, just give them some time to play. It's so important for their emotional and cognitive development. These are the different types of play. Believe it or not, we have categorized them. And you could see that in a preschool environment, for example. Unoccupied play is they're just hanging around, walking around, not really doing anything. Not very common in a preschool environment. Solitary plays when they're playing by themselves. Maybe it's a child sitting, playing with blocks on their own, and there's nothing wrong with that. Onlooker play could be a child just watching other kids. Maybe there's somebody watching that child who's playing with blocks. And usually that is a precursor to that child maybe wanting to engage in the same play or maybe approaching the child. Parallel plays when you have kids in the same proximity, they're close to each other, but they're doing things separately. So they're beside each other, but they're not interacting. So one may be playing with blocks and the other one might be playing with silly putty or something like that. But they're beside each other and it's a pleasant environment. Associative play is they're doing something like, so maybe it's a big table of Legos and they're building stuff. So they're interacting and they're sharing things, but they're not building something together. So a cooperative play is when they're interacting to achieve a common goal. So maybe those kids who are playing with the Legos decide they're going to build a structure together. That's cooperative play. If they're at the same table, they're sharing the blocks, but they don't have a common goal, then that's associative play. Parallel play is they're beside each other, but doing separate things. Onlooker play is one is looking, the other one is playing. Solitary play is just they're playing by themselves, and then unoccupied play is they're just wandering around without any particular activity. Any questions about the different types of play? Okay, children and the media. This is a really sore spot of contention, right? The American Pediatric Society still does not believe that children under 2 should have any media exposure at all. What do we know about 2/3 of kids under 6? watch about 2 hours of TV or on some sort of media device every day. That's a lot of time for kids to be on that. What do we know? Screen time actually negatively affects development. Kids have lower vocabulary scores, they're more sedentary, they don't have as much hands-on play. And what we know is that it is associated with attention problems later. Like, think about it, if a child is used to these dynamic images from video games or from TV or media or anything like that, then they go to school and they're expected to sit there and listen to a teacher talk, they're going to have problems learning how to focus. So the more you give children an opportunity to not have these kind of media devices around and actually learn to sit at a table and talk with adults or talk with each other, you're giving them skills, you're giving them practice in attention that is so critical for their development. In terms of childcare, there are some societies where primarily a parent stays home and then the other parent goes to work. But here, especially here, we see childcare as a major issue. What we do know, it is not associated with negative outcomes in and of itself. What is associated with negative outcomes is the quality of childcare. So if it's a child center that is not clean, that has a very high teacher-child ratio, then that's not going to be good for the child. The younger the child, the lower the teacher-child ratio should be. You want to have a child-centered curriculum. It should be developmentally appropriate. All of these things the parents or caregivers should be looking at before they have a child enter childcare. The staff should be knowledgeable, right? What are their qualifications? Have they actually learned how to teach children? You also want low staff turnover. Find out how frequently people are leaving the daycare center. If there's a high staff turnover, that is a red flag. You also want to talk to the parents or caregivers of kids who are already there to see how happy they are. Look at the children's faces. Are they happy or do they look miserable? Are they ready, like really want to leave? That's a red flag if they want to leave right away. So all of these things you should be considering when you are thinking about childcare. Okay, parental socioeconomic status does have a lot to do with the quality of, unfortunately, a lot of the low income targeted childcare centers don't have as good quality and maybe not have a high turnover rate. So we really need to try to investigate that as much as possible. Sometimes the childcare could be home-based, so that is another option. It might be cheaper, it might be more cost-effective, but also the home-like environment is really nice for kids as well. Parental socioeconomic status is important. Having an emotionally supportive home environment is important for a child because you want to make sure that child feels safe at home, because when they feel safe, then they can learn and grow and develop. And you want a cognitively enriched home environment. A lot of books, age-appropriate books, limited time on screens, lots of interaction with the people in the home, right? So a lot of times a multi-generational household is also really good for kids because they learn a lot of responsibilities, learn a lot more about their culture as well from these relatives who live with them. So any questions about the socio-emotional development of children, early childhood? I'm gonna stop it. Okay.